Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Semi-Professional Academic Podcast. As always, I am your host with the most ungraded papers on my desk, Jacob Watts. And joining me today is the hilarious, the kind, the super talented, the one and only Dr. Natalia Hubbs.
Thanks, Jacob. That was such a sweet introduction.
Oh, well, Dr. Hubbs, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really honored that you asked me to join you on your podcast.
Oh, I'm very honored that you agreed to come. I always get super nervous when I ask people to be on the show because I don't know. As a white man with a podcast, there's already a lot of bad things working for me. Have you ever seen those memes with a white guy with a podcast? I'm trying really hard not to be one of those.
Well, I will be honest, I have added your podcast to my podcast to listen to, but I have not listened to them yet. But knowing you for all the years that I have, I'm sure that that is not you at all.
Oh, good, good. Well, Doctor, before we get too far along, would you mind just giving a little bit of background information uh about you for our audience?
Sure. Do you want background like just general about me or my academic background or kind of both mashed together?
I love a mashup, so
Okay. Okay. I have a little bit of a weird background. So I was originally born in Poland, and my family actually moved to the US when I was two, because I have an older brother with special needs. And so we moved to the US so that we could get better health care for him, just because at the time in Poland, there really weren't doctors that could help with the special needs issues that he had. So we moved to the US when I was really young. And then I spent most of my childhood in Michigan. I spent a lot of time growing up and doing things like volunteering for Special Olympics, again, because of my special needs brother. I think that's kind of where I really started to realize that I enjoyed working with people, because I got to be a coach for Special Olympics for years. And so that requires a lot of patience to work with kids like that. But I loved it, and I loved helping them and seeing them master skills. And so I think that's where my passion for working with students really came from, although I didn't know it at the time. And then after I graduated from high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I really liked science, and I knew that I really liked math. So when I was looking at colleges, I looked at ones close to home because I wanted to stay close to home so I could help with my brother. And then at that point, my little brother, who I like to refer to as the oops child because there's 16 years difference between us, uh, yeah, he came into the picture late in high school. So I wanted to stay close to home so I could help my family with all of that. So I ended up at Lawrence Tech, which is a engineering college in Southfield, Michigan. It's about 3,500 undergrads. And I sat down at the biomedical engineering table, mostly because it was empty and they advertised themselves as, hey, if you like science and you like math, you should be a biomedical engineer. So I was like, cool, that sounds good. I like science. I like math. Awesome. So I started along that major. And then during my junior year, one of my biology teachers, Dr. ZV, she was like, hey, I really think you'd be good at research. And I looked at her, I was like, I don't know what that means, but sure. It'll be a line on my CV, worst case scenario, if I don't like it. And so I started doing research with her, and we had been working for weeks, and we ran an agarose gel to see if we had been able to amplify one of the genes we were trying to clone. No, it failed. It was an epic failure. And there was something about that epic failure that I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, why did this fail? And so, middle of my junior year, I had what I like to refer to as my first quarter life crisis. And I changed majors from biomedical engineering to molecular and cell biology. And so, Dr. ZV and then Dr. Timmons both of them were really strong female role models for me. One of them was a biology professor, the other one was an organic chemistry professor. And I worked with both of them, and I learned from them you could go to grad school and you could get paid to do what you love. So I ended up, like I said, switching my major, switching my life completely around, and I went to graduate school. And when I went to grad school, I knew that I wanted to not only do research, but because of all my experiences with working with special needs kids, and then I did a lot of tutoring growing up, and then I want my senior project for my undergraduate was actually developing an organic chemistry lab to be used for the organic lab. So I worked with students and surveys and like trying to make the lab handout better and whatnot. So I knew I wanted to go into teaching. So when I got to grad school, in addition to all the normal research stuff I was doing, I was working on a certification in college teaching at Michigan State too. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now. And then as I was finishing up my PhD, I got fortunate enough that I got a job at Hanover doing what I wanted to do. So here I am 7 years later.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. I have so many questions. So I'm gonna be jumping around a little bit with because that's how my brain works. So like I'm sorry. But I'm still laughing at the oops child. Like that's so funny. Like because you said like you came to the picture when you were 16, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And are you familiar with the eldest daughter syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that really applied to you like during like your childhood and like when you were like pursuing your degrees?
Yeah, so I always feel like, so even though I'm the middle child,
Mhm.
for most of my life, I was the youngest child.
Mhm.
But because my older brother has special needs, I feel like I have experienced being the oldest child, the youngest child, and the middle child. And as the only daughter, I also have that experience of, that eldest daughter syndrome. And it's so funny because my little brother, love him to death, but he's a little turd. And the thing that he gets away with, oh my gosh, I would never have when I was his age. And it's just, it drives me crazy. But so I'm always teasing him for it.
No, I mean I'm not the eldest daughter, but I am the oldest, and like there's like 2.5 years difference between me and my brother, and still like some of the stuff that he did, I was like, it's like this could not be the same parental team I had. Like get like where were the subs? Like what's going on? Like there's it's just not true. I mean, like don't get me wrong, like I wasn't like mistreated or anything, but I'm just like, okay, seems like policies lined up a little bit around here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And you touch on it, you of having just strong positive representation of women in STEM. And now that you kind of get to be that for other students, how does that kind of like feel to know that because of like their representation, you get to be that for like the next wave of students or next generation of women in STEM?
Honestly, it feels really surreal. So I remember when I was an undergrad and just kind of going through all my classes, I always used to be like, wow, if I ever get to teach, like I want to be like ZV and Timmons. And when I was actually writing my tenure teaching portfolio that I had to submit, I really struggled with it because I was kind of in like this funk of just, am I even teaching right? Like, what am I doing? Like, should I even really be going up for tenure? Like, have I really like earned this? And I didn't look at my student evals for a long time because I was just like, I feel like last semester sucked. It was just bad. And then I was like, okay, I'm supposed to like turn this in a month. Like, I really need to start working on this. And there was a student eval that I am trying to remember the exact quote, but basically along the lines of, she inspired me to like want to try and to go into science and supported me. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh. that's what ZV and Timmons did for me. Like I always wanted to do that for someone. So like reading that, it kind of felt like just coming full circle, and it's just an amazing feeling, because you don't go into teaching thinking that every student is going to love you and want to take your classes and stuff. But I mean, you always hope for that, right?
Yeah.
But when you have those students in your class that are like, she changed my life, like this class was amazing. I want to go into this field now because of her. It just feels like the biggest win, and you truly feel like you've made a difference in at least one student's life. And it's just an amazing feeling. And it makes you feel like you're just in charge of the world and like you have the superpower. But at the same time, it makes you feel like super humbled because here's this person who maybe was lost, didn't know what they wanted to do, and then you help them find their way. And that's kind of what happened to me in undergrad. I had no idea what I really wanted to do. My parents, when I started undergrad, they basically said to me, well, don't screw it up. Good luck. I don't know what to tell you. They didn't go to college, and Poland didn't really, at the time, my dad went to like a technical school in a way. And so he probably has, well, more like a trade school. So he probably has a trade school engineering type thing in Poland, but it doesn't really translate into America. So they basically said, well, you have a high school education here. So yeah, when I went to college, they're like, we don't know how to help you. Good luck. Don't screw it up. Like, we can't tell you what to do. Find something you're happy with, and don't screw it up, essentially.
Love that. Love that advice of just don't screw it up. But so true. I mean, and I'm sure like you can relate to this a little bit, but I'm on my PhD now and I just did my master's, and my family is very supportive. I want to get that out there, but like they don't really understand what I do. So like right now starter project I'm on is assessing um sex ratios of sawfly hybrids, and they're like, what's a sawfly? What are you doing that for? Why do we care? Like that kind of thing. And it's like it's not mean or whatever, but it's just kind of like I don't know. So like I always have to give like very like generic intro terms. So like when you were doing undergrad, I'm sure you got that, but like did they kind of start getting it a little bit more like when you were doing grad school, or did that just become even more of like isolated in more terms you had to generalize for them?
I would say it probably became even more like we have no idea what you're doing. So it was super cute when I was an undergrad and I switched my major. The but the degree that I switched to is molecular and cell biology, and my mom could never remember it. And part of it is the language barrier, right? They moved to the US in their 30s, not speaking a word of English short of like yes, no, and okay. And so she would have in her wallet when people are like, "Oh, your daughter's in college. What is she studying? Like, what is she doing?" She would have this piece of paper that she would pull out because she had me write out the name of my degree. So she would pull it out and she would read it to them. And we're like, "Oh, that's so cool. What is it?" And she's like, "Molecular and cell biology." And they're like, "Yeah, but what does she do?" "Molecular and cell biology." And then as I got to grad school, they were like, okay, bacteria, viruses, weird things like that. Was basically what they would tell people. Oh, I don't know. She studies bacteria and viruses. But it's funny because they do now remember some of my stories. So I was telling them about, we were talking about eggs, and there's, of course, eggs with white shells and brown shells, and then there's ones that have like this bluish greenish tint to them. And my mom had heard from one of my aunts in Poland that the green and blue eggs cost more money because they have less cholesterol. And I kind of looked at her and went, yeah, that's not possible. That's not really why they're blue or green. I'm like, they're blue or green because the chickens are infected with a retrovirus. And I mean, the virus is totally harmless to the chickens, totally harmless to us, but that's why they're blue or green. And so they actually remember that fact because my dad started a new job recently, and one of his colleagues was like, check out the eggs that our chickens just laid. And my dad's like, did you know that that's because of a virus? And so I was so proud because it took 10 plus years, but they do listen, they do try, but they definitely are just like, yep, she does stuff with bacteria, stuff with viruses. I don't know. It smells bad. That's all I know. So she does weird things.
It smells bad. Oh my goodness. But that's so cute though. And like I love like the little script that your mom had where she was just like, this is the script I have. I'm reading like this is what I'm going off of. And I honestly love that. I mean, of course, they like when you pursue like a career in like anything, but like I've just with our experience in science, naturally you're gonna know a lot more niche things than them. So like, and unfortunately, sometimes you need those niche things to make more broader sense to them.
Mhm.
But I just see when they try, it's just that's so like that's everything. Like just the effort. And I feel like a lot of people don't get it. It's like I don't need you to understand everything that I'm doing. I just need you to try just a little bit to understand.
Yeah, exactly. And they were so cute. They drove the hour and a half from where they lived to where I was in grad school at Michigan State. And they drove for my thesis defense. It was early in the morning, and they sat through the whole thing. And my mom was like, I didn't really understand any of that. She's like, but I thought it was really cool that you had the thing that looked that you called a protein and that it was doing a little spinning dance. She's like, that was my favorite part.
You know, a win is a win. A win is a win.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to think about like how I want to go about this because I just have so many questions. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're totally fine.
Um, but since we just talked about it, because I mean, you know, and I know that applying to grad school is a daunting process. So would you mind telling the audience just like how you found Michigan State and like what attracted you to that specific program in the department?
Yeah. So when I was an undergrad, my junior year, during my first quarter life crisis, I didn't really know kind of what science field I wanted to go into. So with Dr. ZV, I had been working on Pseudomonas or working with Pseudomonas, and it infects plants and causes all sorts of damage. And so I'd been working kind of more on a microbiology project. But I also really loved organic chemistry. And so for my senior project, I decided to work with Dr. Timmons on synthesis of the enantiomers of warfarin. And then between my junior and senior year, I was fortunate enough to receive an REU at the University of Minnesota in their microbiology and immunology program. And so, because I was kind of like leaning towards micro or organic, I kind of wanted to say, okay, well, I have this cool opportunity here where I'm doing micro research. And then I got this micro REU. And then my senior year, I'm going to do organic chemistry stuff. Hopefully, by doing these two very different projects, I'll get a better sense of what I really like. And so after my REU at University of Minnesota, I completely fell in love with microbiology. And even though I really enjoyed my senior project with Dr. Timmons, my true passion was really working with the smelly microbes. So as I was applying to grad school, basically what I started doing was I just started looking at schools that have really good microbiology programs. And so I didn't apply to a lot of grad schools. I applied to the University of Michigan. I applied to Michigan State. And then I applied to University of Minnesota just because since we had an if you were accepted to an REU, they waived your application fee. So I was like, well, I might as well apply to it because it's not costing me any money. And then I applied to Wayne State. And then there's one more that I applied to. Oh, Notre Dame. And so a lot of those were either schools that had sent me things and said, hey, you should apply here, or schools that had really good microbiology programs. And I also wanted something that wasn't too far away from home, far enough away where I could live on my own because I was definitely ready to move out by that point, but close enough where if something was happening at home, I could, come down for the weekend or even for the day and like help out. So that was kind of how I picked the schools. And then one of the things that I really liked about Michigan State, because it was my top choice, was that they had that certification in college teaching program. So that was part of the reason why that one was my top choice. It was about an hour and a half away from home. It had a really good microbiology program. It had that teaching certification program. And there were a lot of people just looking through the website and based on the research that they did, there were just a lot of really cool and interesting research projects. And so it also happened to be the first place that I interviewed. So I was really nervous because I was like, oh, geez, don't screw this up. Like, this is where you really want to go. But it ended up kind of working out.
That's awesome. It's very funny because I kind of went through like the similar thing. Like I had a quarter life crisis my junior year
I
because
remember I was there for that.
yeah, so much fun. So I swear, like I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm very grateful for it because as weird as that sounds, because I was very grateful that like I'm on a path now that I like. But I mean, I don't know if it was for you, but like it was such a humbling experience at the same time. Just to be like, I've been doing this for years and I don't even know if this is how I want to do. I don't know. Like my parents were not, they weren't bad, but they never had to like navigate that situation. So when I told them, I was like, hey, I'm teaching my major, they're like, you're what? Like, what do we do? Like completely that. But yeah. And then when I went to uh grad school, both times, I went to the first place that I interviewed with. Well, for my master's, I didn't have to interview anywhere. So I find it very funny. And UK, which is where I'm at now, was that same kind of environment where, oh, this is my top choice. I don't want to mess this up, which is, I don't know. Did you like that your top choice was like the first place where you interviewed? Because I kind of didn't because I had no idea what to go off of.
It was both good and bad, right? Because it was exciting because you're like, oh, this is my first choice. Like they're inviting me for an interview. That's awesome. So you have that like excitement. But then as soon as you have that excitement, you have that like, oh crap, I haven't had any other interviews. Well, what's this going to be like? I don't want to screw this up. Like, this is my top choice. What if I do something wrong? And they're like, oh, we don't want this freak at our college. At least that's what was going through my mind. And so I was definitely, after the initial excitement, the feeling of doom kind of set in. So I kind of did like a 180, but it was helpful to have professors to like sit down and talk with and here are the things you should do, here are the things you shouldn't do when you interview. And so they definitely helped calm me down quite a bit. And I remember the first night of my interview actually calling Dr. Timmons and talking to her on the phone, and she was like, you're gonna do great, like just remember the things we talked about. And so it was just so cute that she gave me her phone number and was like, you can call me if you get really stressed during the interview and you just need someone to calm you down. And so I'm glad that I had that resource. But yeah, it was definitely terrifying of, I don't want to screw this up because this is my top choice.
Yeah. And I remember when I was interviewing because I didn't have to interview where went for my master's. I just applied and then I got in, which was so weird, which should have been a red flag. But, anyways, but I remember I asked to meet with you before I interviewed for my PhD because I was like, I haven't interviewed for a like academic position in probably since I applied to college. So like I was out of the game and I had nobody in my family kind of pursue this kind of graduate school. So I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know that you were supposed to like look and find advisors like in the summer and email them. I just did that by chance. So I was like, I have no idea what's going on. And I just really want the record to show that like I'm so grateful that you made time to talk with me and give me tips and advice because it really did help me a lot.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And while we're on the subject of interviewing, did you ever get asked like a really weird, like bizarre question during like your grad school interviews?
Um, I didn't get, not that I remember, like nothing sticks out. Like there was a weird, bizarre interaction for sure,
Yeah.
but not a weird question.
Okay. Well, not weird question, but like this is a question I didn't know how to answer. So it was not at UK, it was at another institution. And first of all, they made I had to be there in person and interview at 7 in the morning. That should have been illegal to begin with. And keep in mind, I am in interview attire at 7 a.m. So that means I was getting up at like 5:30, get dressed, the whole shebang. I sit down. And like no shade to this professor at all. Like I really don't mean it as such. It was someone who was not taking students, someone whose lab is full, and someone whose research like I just really wasn't interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And my person, like my like guide there, who was a PhD student, was just like, "You're familiar with this dude's research?" And I was like, "Not at all." Like, why would I be? And he goes, you might want to do a quick Google search before you go in there." I was like, "He's not taking students, and like, why do I need to be aware of this?" But I was like, "Okay." And so I fully prepare. It's like, "Hi, I'm Jacob." Da 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 da. He's like, "Oh, hi, Jacob. Sit down." And then like we started talking. The very first question he asked me was, "What do you think is missing from our understanding of ecology, evolution, and behavior in the field of biology?"
Oh, wow.
I know. I was like, and keep in mind, I am 22 years old at this time. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know me. I guess I don't know. And so I like sat down and I was like, "Oh, that's a really good question. I'll let me think about that for a second." He's like, "Go right ahead." And then he pulls up and he starts answering an email like right in front of me while I'm doing all this. I was just like, "Okay, I gotta think of something fast because I'm gonna get written off here like in 5 seconds." So I say something along the lines of, "I think like what's missing is just like our true understanding of like all ecological interactions and how the change in environment. And I think that we spend too much time focusing on just species A and how it gets from um, point A to point B, when we could also be looking at species two, who's on point D, and see if we can kind of track to see if there's any similarities with that species and how species A is kind of projecting, and see if we can use any past data to guess about what that path is going to be like." Which I thought was a pretty good answer. And then he's like, "Okay." And I kept going. I was like, "Needless to say, I did not get into that school." But no, I always ask because then I asked like my other grad students who are interviewing at that same institution. I was like, "Did you have the same? Like, wasn't that one question crazy?" And there's like, we never got asked that question. So either I killed it and gave like the best answer he was looking for of all time, or he was just like, "Nope, scrapping this. This is the worst answer I've ever heard."
Oh man, that's such a open-ended question. Wow. Well, and it kind of baffles me that he turned to his email. I mean, I guess that's better than like staring you down and being like, have you thought of anything yet?" But not by much, I don't think.
No, and I was like, "This is the question I get asked out the gate. What happened to hello, good morning, my name is like just
Yeah.
immediately." And I was like, "Okay." But it's so funny now. Like it's so funny now, but in the moment, mortified, terrified. And then I got interviewed by someone who was like an expert in Wolbachia, and I was like, "Why are you guys giving me this? Like, you are setting me up for failure. I've been on this project for a year. I don't know so much. I know so little about this." And he made it very clear that I did not know a lot because he had spent the last 20 years studying Wolbachia. And he goes, "At what specific site does it bind in hymenopterans?" I was like, "Okay, goodbye."
That's so sad because the faculty that should be doing those interviews, I mean, I hate to be like, the friendly ones, but we all know that there are faculty that you want to interact with, and then there are those that not even the other faculty really like them because they're just mean. And it's the worst when you get those faculty that volunteer for these things because you can't really, when you're on the planning committee for the interviews, right? You can't really be like, oh gosh, we don't want you. But it just makes it awkward for the students who are getting interviewed, and it's just terrible.
No, it's just bad. And like I'm grateful that the grad students who were there, like as like kind of like my guides and mentors for the weekend, did say he's an asshole. Just to let you know, like he like this is not gonna go like this is not gonna be the highlight of your interview experience. If it is, I'm worried for you. Like, but yeah, so like if this one's probably gonna be your worst one, just letting you know.
Well,
And
that's good that they warned you and had your back.
yeah, that was really helpful, and I really am thankful for them because they were very kind. But yeah, just uh I and we're at the time of filming this, we're going through our round of recruitment for my program, and I was hopping on the pre-interview like social hour with them. I'd be like, y'all please just be kind to yourself. Like this is a very tough time. To have made it this far means like you show promise, like just breathe, relax, you got this, take
No.
your time. It's not the end of the world because no, it is very daunting, or I don't know, maybe I'm just anxious, but
No, it's daunting because you've got faculty, you've got grad students, and everyone is judging you basically. And I remember being part of the recruitment process in grad school, and you would get the fill out these forms about like the candidates and stuff that we had. And so it is super daunting because you know that even though these people are being nice to you, you second guess every like, well, are you being nice to me because you're testing me? And so it just, I don't know, I tend to get in my own head and second guess everything and then like spiral out of control from there and somehow convince myself that everything's going to go terribly. I was super nervous for all of it.
kind of jumping around here and all that because anyone who's watched the show knows like there's no timeline. But actually the first question that comes to mind now is I don't think a lot of people under like know this, but when I was going to college, that like my freshman year was also your first year at Hanover. And obviously, whenever you start at a new place, it's like very daunting, but especially your first time in a classroom as the professor. Can you talk about that like a little bit and what that was like?
My first year still haunts me. It was it was hard. I honestly, so my first year, fall semester, I taught two courses. I taught Bio 161, our ecology and evolution class, which was pretty much all first years. And then I taught an upper level cell biology class, which was half seniors, half juniors. My Bio 161 class, things were like, it was fine. I felt like I connected with the students, and I don't know if it was because it was my first year and it was their first year. And that class seemed to go fine. There weren't really a lot of issues with students. But then my cell class, that was terrible. I felt like everything that I tried in that class just epically failed, and that students just hated me and that they wanted me to leave. And, I would try to make conversation with students. And I remember it was one of the first labs. And when students were introducing themselves in class, I jotted stuff down about them. And so there's a student who they're interested in going to medical school. And so they were saying that they were a senior and that they were looking at med schools to apply to. So in lab, you walk around and you chat with students when people are working on things, and that's really where you get to know them. And so I stopped by and I was like, hey, like, how's it going? And the student was like, fine. And I'm like, so, you said that you were applying to medical schools. Like, what schools are you applying to? Like, are you interested in MD, DO? Like, what's your deal kind of a thing? And the student just looked me dead in the eyes and was like, places, and
Ah,
then turned away and like continued talking to their partner. And I just kind of stood there and was like, did, ooh, was I not supposed to ask that? Like, what did I
that
do?
was
And it was terrible. So I just kind of like awkwardly went away and I was like, oh, okay, well, my husband went to med school, so like if you have questions or need advice, like let me know. Happy to like help. And like kind of just walked away to the other side of the lab to go try to talk to someone else.
that was so oh my gosh, that was so rude of them. I'm sorry, but like that was just ridiculous because like again, you're just trying to, connect with your students. You're a first year professor, like they don't know you. You're trying to like open up that door of like conversation and they're just like places. Like,
Yeah, it was really, really crappy. And I feel like the first couple of weeks of that class, I dreaded going to class because I was like, I don't know what kind of attitudes I'm going to run into. And so a couple weeks in, I walked in one day and I was like, we're going to start class off a little differently today. Like, we're not going to go into lecture right away. I'm like, I have been, hearing through the grapevines that y'all are unhappy, that you're complaining, that things are too hard, that I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, that's all fine and dandy, but I'm like, let's just take a second to like get to know each other. Like, let's just start completely over and let's just have a conversation. Like, what's your favorite color? Are you a dog person? Are you a cat person? Ask me about my background. I want to know about your background. Where are you from, etc. I'm like, let's just completely start over because it honestly truly seems like we got off on the wrong foot and I don't know how or why, like what went wrong, but let's just start over because I really don't want this to be a terrible semester for you guys and I don't want it to be a terrible semester for me. So like, well, let's just start over. And there were a couple of students that were, just asked me questions about myself. But then the students that had the attitudes, like the places person, of first just like said nothing and were just continued to just be mean the rest of the semester. But things did after that. I think they kind of saw that I was truly honestly trying and that I was a person. At least I hope they did. So things went a little bit better after that. And then there were a couple of students that actually started to come see me one-on-one for office hours. And what made me feel better was a lot of these students were like, it's not you. Like, we see that you're trying. It's just that part of the class that is just kind of crappy. Like, that's just them. That's just how they treat people. And so it's not you. So that made me feel better. But I just felt like nothing could go right in that class. Like, the semester long project that we were working on, partway through the semester like failed, and because it was my first year, like I didn't have time because I was making the solutions as we were going and everything else. I just didn't have time to completely redo outside of class to like catch stuff up. So I was like, well, you guys are still getting the experience. This is what happens in research. Stuff fails. Like, we'll just continue along with the control. Well, that made people angry. And then the fluorescent microscope, the bulb died in the middle of an experiment. And so people blame that on me too. So it was just like every little failure. And so it was kind of terrible. And I remember reading my evals at the end of that semester, and my bio 161 ones were fine. And then there are the cell bio ones. And there were ones that were really nice and like good constructive criticism. And then there are ones that were just absolutely mean and terrible, like somebody telling me that I had no teaching style and that I don't deserve to be at Hanover and that I should leave. And clearly, I'm completely over it. Like, I don't remember that quote at all, right? But that was awful. So, yeah, that was my first semester. And then
oh,
I thought it couldn't get any worse.
uh-oh.
It did. Um, so Hanover, the intro bio sequence is kind of special. So Bio 161 is ecology and evolution, and then Bio 185 is our molecular and cell bio. And when I got to Hanover, Bio 185 was known as the weed out course. It
Mhm.
was known as this is the intro bio course that is going to kick your ass and you're not going to do well and it's terrible. And I remember during the fall, I started to hear about how awful this course is from students, from faculty, and I was getting hella nervous because I was like, this is the class I was excited about. Like, I helped teach this at Michigan State. Like, why are people flipping out about this? Like, what is happening? And so there was a lot of like other kind of stuff that happened, like interpersonal issues between people in the biology department that related to this course as well. And so then there's like that added like external pressure and drama for that. And, basically comments of like, well, you're going to teach this wrong and then students won't be ready for the next courses. And so there was just like that added drama from colleagues. And so I started my winter semester, and there were 65 students between the two sections that I taught. And I did my best to like get excited, and I did my best to try to take what my colleagues said, well, these are the things you have to teach, and try to make it my own. And I remember struggling so hard because I was like, why do we have to teach them how to draw the structure of fructose? Like, this means nothing to them. Some of them haven't taken a chemistry class. Like, they haven't taken organic chemistry. They don't know what this means. I don't know how to draw fructose. So why am I making them learn how to, like, why am I making them memorize how to draw fructose? Like, this is dumb. And, I kept getting like, well, that's just how we've always done it. And I'm like, but maybe just because that's how we've always done it isn't how we always should do it. And so there was just, yeah, so that was really hard. And at the end of that semester, I felt like an utter failure. And I had students tell me that I didn't know what I was doing, that I was teaching the class too hard, my expectations were too much, and that, in lecture things would make sense, but then the exams were way harder than they should have been, and that it was clear that I didn't know what I was doing. And so at the end of that, I remember I spent 2 days in bed during our spring break, bawling my eyes out because of my evals and being like, I don't even know what I want to teach microbiology because no one's going to like me anyways, and they're going to tell me I suck. So why am I here? So yeah, it was a hard year. And so after 2 days of like my pity party, I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I love microbiology. Like, I'm going to do what I want with this class, and I'm just going to be me because I'm weird. I'm a really eccentric person. I like stickers. I like playing music in lab. I like making really dumb punny jokes, and I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to put myself out there, and if people don't like me, then whatever, that's on them. And so that was like the first time my first year that I felt like I was being truly authentically me and ignoring what everyone was telling me to do and ignoring how everyone was telling me to teach and what to do. Because up until this point, everyone's like, well, you should be teaching this way or you should be dealing with students this way. So I was trying to be me while also trying to incorporate things that weren't me, and it just wasn't working. So micro went really well. I had a lot of fun, minus the first day where I ended up at the urgent care with a 104-degree fever and a
Oh,
bunch of shots. Yeah, we weren't sure if I had meningitis or what because my neck was stiff. So that was fun. But after that little incident of being really sick the first 2 days of May term of my first year, everything else went totally fine. And that was like the first time where I was like, wow, this is what I imagined teaching being like. This is what I imagined things going as. But yeah, my first year was rough and it was pretty terrible.
no. Like not not to make you like re dig into all those details, but has it gotten better since your first year, like with just like your sense of self, like knowing like what you're gonna do and like having more confidence? I don't know, because I feel like a lot of times as someone who's gotten evals back themselves, sometimes you do get very helpful constructive criticism, which like you're always grateful for. I mean, you're always grateful for the ones that are just like, you're amazing. Like those, like you love those as well. But there's always like and like no tea, no shade to those people. There's always some people who are just doing bad in the course who don't want to accept that like maybe this just isn't the field for them. Maybe they just didn't put as much effort into understanding the material and into the course, and they just are looking to blame anyone else but themselves. Like, is that still happening, or are you starting to see like a change in like that direction?
So I pretty much, after that winter term, starting with spring term, my first year, saw a complete change. And I think a lot of it was because I just, said, screw it. Like, I'm not an authoritative person. That's just not me. And what works for, Gall and Rubino with being authoritative, it didn't work for me. And I think a big part of that was because when I started my job at Hanover, I was 26,
Which is
So
very young, very, very young.
so being 26 and being 4 years older than the people who are seniors, I think a lot of the attitude was like, well, who the fuck are you to tell me what to do? At least that's kind of what it seemed.
Mhm.
So being that young and then being a female, and I think that all kind of added to it. And then there were also like other outside things like professors talking bad about me to students instead of talking to me
Wait,
because
what? That happened?
yeah, and it so basically, right, as students do, sometimes you go to a professor and you're like, well, Professor so and so is doing this. And so I always tell students, like, well, I'll bet Professor so and so has a reason for why they're doing such and such. Go talk to them. Like, appreciate that you feel comfortable enough to complain to me, but like, there's probably a reason they're doing it. Like, go talk to them.
Yeah.
But that is not, from my understanding, not what happened with me. And so I actually had a lunch conversation with the person who was notorious for doing this. And it was really uncomfortable. And it didn't really help because they were basically like, well, I'm going to do what I see fit for students. But
Uh,
that's a whole nother, that's
uh,
a whole nother.
oh, the way I would have fought, the way I would be swinging. So kudos to you for having self-control.
But basically I after that spring term, I just kind of said I'm just going to be authentically myself. And I spent a lot of time telling students why I was doing things the way that I was doing them and having conversations with them about that. And I think that helped a lot. So I haven't really, I mean, every now and then I'll get a comment like on evals where students will complain about something and I'm like, that's not a real complaint. Like you weren't in class probably, but okay, whatever. But for the most part, I would say 99% of them are totally fine. And again, like you said, you get that one student who probably shouldn't be there, and sometimes they get grumpy at you because they don't come to class and they didn't turn stuff in, and you've given them an extension after extension after extension, but you're not flexible enough for whatever reason. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But, well, I'm glad it's gotten better because I know like that first year was really rough. I will say though, like as someone who was in one of the sections of Bio 185 of your first year, I really loved the because and like this is no shade to like other professors at all, but I love like animations, I love drawings, I love like colorful things that like grab my attention. And I loved how like you tried to incorporate like either like an animatronic, like not animatronic, but like animation into your lectures and drawings and like kind of get us engaged that way. And I don't know if you still do this or not, but I remember you offered this extra credit opportunity to like either do like a video, telenovela, music video to like a concept that we had in class. And I was like, this is so fun. I'm so doing this.
I so I actually took that, and instead of making it an extra credit opportunity,
Hmm.
it's actually turned into an assignment. So, and I've opened it up to, it doesn't have to be a video. It just can't be like a PowerPoint presentation. So it's just like a communicating biology project. And so you can pick a topic in class that maybe you are struggling with, right? Because the best way to grasp something is to teach it to someone else.
Hmm.
Or maybe a topic that we barely touched on, but you're like, hey, I really want to dive more into that. But as long as it's somehow related to molecular cell biology, you can pick any topic and you somehow have to basically break it down and teach it to the next year 185 students. So, because of that extra credit project, and because I got such good reviews from students, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I had so much fun with this," I ended up incorporating it as a project, and so it's actually worth the amount that an exam is. And so, particularly for those students who are like, well, I really struggle with like exam anxiety, it really helps boost their grades. So, even if they're not getting A's on the exam, but they do the project and they earn an A and they do everything else, they can still earn an A in the class because they've shown me through all the other means that, like, yes, they understand the material. It's just maybe they just struggle with test anxiety. And I know that was something I struggled with. So, yeah, so that has turned into like a project because of that.
That's so cool. Because I don't know if I have test anxiety, but I just don't do well with exams. And so just having that kind of thing where I got to be like creative and like for the people wondering at home, me and my best friend Cole, who he does not watch this show, so I don't know why I keep name dropping him. He's never watched or listened to it, but we did a parody to God's plan called Cell's Plan, where we um walked through the process of like the cell cycle and all that. And oh my gosh, it was so bad. It was funny.
Was so good.
It was high camp, but I had such a fun time doing it. I had such a fun time doing it because we got multiple angles. We were filmed on location. Like it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever done, but it was so much fun. And I just love that. I love that so much.
It was great. And I saved all the links to the projects. And I don't know if you still have it up on YouTube or not, but I think it was a YouTube video that I'm pretty sure because a lot of people put it up on YouTube, but I still have all the links to the projects and stuff. So I hope it's still up there, but it was awesome. I very vividly remember your video, and it was great because one of the things that we did with the videos was, and again, it was to try to engage students and have them get to know me outside of class and like see that I'm a real person and that I'm not like this crazy hard ass professor. But we had a viewing party. And so I bought snacks and stuff and I brought the dog, and it was in was it in 112? It was in Science Center 112. And so we just had a viewing party where we played all the videos so that everyone in the class could see what their classmates had done. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I absolutely loved it, and I'm so glad that like you kept that as an assignment. Now that you are tenured and tenured like very young, I might add in, and you're on sabbatical right now, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. How does that feel like to like achieve like that kind of like milestone like relatively early in your career? Like what's that
Um,
like?
it's weird. Um, it I don't know, tenure is really odd because everyone's like, you have to work towards tenure, and then you get there and you're kind of like, okay. what now? And I think earlier in my career, tenure seemed like a bigger deal. And as I kind of moved through my career, especially during my fourth year, I would say, of teaching, not that tenure wasn't a big deal and isn't a big deal, and I'm not like excited and proud that I got it, but it's just another thing, Like, I
Mhm.
don't really, I don't know. And I'm sure that other academics are probably like, what's wrong with you? But I just view it as another accomplishment that, yes, it's awesome, but I don't view it as a reason to kind of change the path that you're on. And I remember during my fourth year review with the provost, one of the things that he said to me is that a lot of people have this attitude, well, I'm not going to speak up and I'm not going to do this until I get tenure because then I'll be protected. And he was like, but I think it's really important to be the faculty member and the person that you want to be before you get tenure, because while tenure is, great and it basically means that unless you do something really stupid, you're not going to get fired, like you should still be your authentic self. And so I kind of took that to heart and I was like, well, I'm just going to be me. And if there are things that I think are dumb that the administration is doing, I'm going to tell them. I mean, I might not say you're dumb, but I'm going to, in a professional manner, tell them and speak my mind, especially if it has downstream negative effects on my colleagues and my students. And so when I got to tenure, I think because I had been, in a way, acting like a person who already had tenure by speaking their mind, at least that's what academia says is acting like you have tenure. I think it was just like, okay, cool. I have tenure. I get to like I get to take a sabbatical now, learn more things, but see I don't think it profoundly changed me as a person, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And just as a student who's had you and like knows you, I really appreciate the authenticity and candidacy that you had even before you had tenure. Especially as someone who was there during the height of the COVID experience of college, because I really understand, and I'm not, like saying anything bad about people who don't speak up, but knowing that you were there and like you were honest in telling us as students like what is going on with the college, like what you all know, like during a time like that was so helpful. And I understand why people don't, but I'm so glad that you did speak up and was quote unquote acting like you had tenure already.
Well, thank you. And I don't know, like I said, tenure is weird, and sometimes I think about it and I'm like, maybe the tenure thing should just be abolished, and not in the sense like, obviously I'm so grateful that I have job security, right? But I think that when people get tenure, they typically go kind of like one of two ways. They're like, cool, I've got tenure. I'm going to keep on keeping on. Like, I was doing stuff before tenure. I'm going to keep doing stuff. And they don't really change. And then there's the people who get tenure and are like, hell yeah, I got tenure. I can sit back and do nothing now. And then what you see is you see this drop off. You see this drop off in their teaching. They don't care anymore. So they're no longer trying to make their lectures better, their assignments better. And so you see this kind of drop off in just teaching and how they approach students, and you see this drop off in like research output and stuff like that. And then you see a drop off in their service. So they're no longer volunteering to do things. They no longer want to serve on committees and things like that. And that is part of the reason why I'm like, well, maybe this idea of tenure should be abolished, or there should be some sort of incentive afterwards, because at least at Hanover, there's no like merit raises or merit bonuses. So for the faculty who do go above and beyond, there's nothing that you get for that. And I'm not saying necessarily that you should, always be getting things, but I think the people who after tenure continue to go above and beyond at their job when they really don't have to, because that's part of the beauty of tenure, right? I think that there should be merit raises and things like that. Or, maybe when you're reviewing grants and you see a person whose teaching is still like excellent and they're putting in a grant, and someone who has dropped off the face of the planet with their teaching after tenure and they're putting in for a grant, maybe we don't fund that person and we say, hey, maybe instead of continuing research stuff, you should do some research into how you can make your teaching better, because that's dropped off since you've gotten tenure. So I don't know, like I said, I'm very grateful, and I don't want it to sound like I'm not grateful and like I haven't worked hard to earn tenure, because I have,
Mhm.
but I am trying to I just don't want it to change me as a person and kind of what I do on campus,
Yeah,
because I don't think that's the point of tenure personally.
yeah, I agree. And I know you. I think this will just give you like a sense of security, but I don't think this is going to change like how much of an advocate you are for your colleagues and your students. So if that makes you feel any better.
It does. Thank you. You're so sweet. I so I remember spring term of my first year, and it's funny because in all of your letters of recommendations, I actually quoted this and cited this. And I remember I was just feeling so crappy during my first year after, especially after like 185. And I believe I want to say you were with Dr. Gall in herpetology your first year. No.
Yeah, I was.
You were. Okay, okay, good. I remember that correctly. And I was walking down the hallway towards my lab, and you were walking out of Dr. Gall's lab, or maybe you were walking to his lab. But anyway, you stopped me and you're like, I just want you to know, Dr. Hubbs, like I know you had a hard semester, but I just want you to know, like, thank you for not giving up on me. Like, I really appreciate you, and I see what you did and what you were trying to do. And I still remember that all these years later. And it made me feel so much better about my winter term experience, because I was like, okay, at least one of those students saw what I was trying to do. And that has just stuck with me all these years. And it just had such an impact on me that when I was writing your letters, I talked about that experience, and talked about how that experience and that quote and that interaction with you, how that like truly captures you as a person and like your identity. And so anyways, I just thought I would share how much of an effect even years later that has had on my teaching career.
That makes me feel so that makes me feel so happy. Like, and because I mean, I know my first year was rough and as a student, so I can only imagine how it was as a professor. But I just no, I just really did appreciate, like, I remember I would come into office hours, I would ask questions, and I was like, I am just really not getting this, and I want to do this, and I don't know, like, I will always be grateful for that, and I also didn't know how to talk to professors, in which I'm not known for, I mean, people know me, I'm not known for like for lack of better terms, orthodoxness with approaching and the way I speak. So I was just like, let's just see how this happens. And I'm glad that it came off the way that like I intended it to. Like just like very grateful and honest and thankful. And so, oh, good. I was worried. I've always worried about that. I was like, I hope she knows like I'm being serious here. And like I just really genuinely did appreciate her.
No, I totally get that. And I think that a lot of students wouldn't say that to a professor, right? Even if they felt it. And a lot of students have that like, well, should I tell them? Should I not tell them? And the answer is yes. All of us as professors, we even nowadays, even 7 years into this, we are constantly second guessing what we're doing. We're constantly trying to make things better. We care about our students. I call you guys my kids. And, it's funny when people ask me and my husband, like, oh, do you have kids? I'm like, oh, yeah, well, this semester I have about 48. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, I'm a teacher. Like, they're my kids.
Yeah.
And so, if you ever have an experience with a professor where you feel like they've changed your life in a way, or they've helped you, absolutely tell them, whether it's via email or whether it's a thank you card or telling them in person. I actually, both at home and at work, I have a drawer in each place where if I've received like a thank you card, and in my inbox, I have the emails flagged. And I have all of those notes and letters like saved. And so when I'm having a really bad day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gave like the crappiest lecture of my life. Like, what am I doing? I suck. I will read those and they just make me feel like, no, you don't suck. You just had a bad day. Everyone has bad days.
Mhm.
And those like little notes of thank you, whether it's just like a little post-it note of, I have post-it notes saved where students are like, hey, I heard you're having a tough week. I bought you this little sweet tea because you're sweet. Thanks for all you do. Like I save all of that. And I look at it when I'm having a bad day and it just brings me so much joy. So if there's anyone in your life, who's ever impacted you that way, you should absolutely tell them. And that goes not just for professors, but just in general. I feel like we as humans do a bad job of saying thank you to people, and we're really quick to criticize and talk about things that make us angry, but we're not always great at expressing appreciation. And I think each of us, myself including, could do a better job of saying thank you to people for things that they've done.
So true, so true. Oh, well, Dr. Hubbs, we're running out of time here and wrapping it up, but I want to ask this question because I ask every guest I've had on for season two. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, whether it be professional, academic, personal, like whatever, what would you tell your past self?
Um, I would tell my past self to let go of the little things and just be yourself, because it's not worth trying to stress over things that you don't have control over. And it's taken me a really long time, and I still struggle with this, but it's taken me a really long time to, when I'm stressed about something, to think about, okay, why am I stressed about it? Is it in my control? If I'm stressed about it and the answer is no, it's not in my control, I gotta let it go and move on. And I still struggle with that, but I think that would have saved me a lot of quarter life crises. I think that would have saved me a lot of tears and sleepless nights. But also, kind of along with that, one of the biggest things that I've learned in my journey in academia, particularly with teaching, is it's just so important to be your true and authentic self. People can see through when you're not. And for those people who don't like you when you're being your true authentic self, that's okay. You probably don't need them in your life. Move on. So
Period.
those
Yeah.
are those are the things I would go back and tell myself.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. Well, Dr. Hubbs, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the podcast. I had a great time and it was so nice to getting to chat with you.
I had a lot of fun too. And again, I'm so honored that you invited me to be on your podcast. I feel so special.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I know that just getting started with the sabbatical, but I hope it's everything you want it to be and more. And I just hope that everything just keeps going up and up from here.
Thanks so much. And I'm looking forward to all of the grad school updates that you'll send me.
Mhm. I will. It's a humbling experience, but it's a good experience at the same time.
Yeah, totally get that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for having me on here. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to everyone at home, always remember, I do not get paid enough. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.